We're back for a follow-up pressure washer video for Rugged U how-to video from the ROP shop. In our last video, we walked you through selecting the right pressure washer pumps for your unit. We also showed you how to navigate the ROP shop's website and to get your order delivered quickly. In this video, we'll walk you through the process of installing your new pressure washer pump. The process may take some elbow grease, but we'll stay rugged together. So let's get started. There aren't many tools you'll need for this job, but it's a good idea to gather them ahead of time. First, you'll need the correct size wrench for your original pump's bolts. If you're replacing the bolts, you'll want the wrench size for that as well. Next, if your unit has a set screw securing the spline to the engine shaft, be sure to have the correct Allen wrench handy. If you're not sure if your original pump has a set screw, we'll be covering that part later in the video. Finally, have some anti-seize and some thread locker blue available. In our previous video, we identified a couple types of pumps seen in the residential commercial market. Installation is very similar, so we'll show you how to install your pump on a vertical engine, also known as an undermounted unit. Horizontal engines, or side-mounted units, tend to be easier to access and to work on. During the installation, you might need to pull on the recoil start cable a couple of times. Disconnect the spark plug wire to prevent the motor from starting during this process. It is best to avoid laying an undermounted pressure washer on its back. This means you'll need to remove and reinstall your new pump with your pressure washer in the upright position. However, if you want to be able to lay your vertical mounted pressure washer on its side or back, you will need to be aware of where the oil will pool during the install to avoid leakage. Be sure the pressure washer is in a firm, stationary position to avoid damaging the unit, the pump, or yourself in the process. Using the correct size wrench, remove the bolts that attach the pump to the motor. You should be able to work your pump free and pull it off with the engine shaft. However, if you can't get the pump to come off, don't take a sledgehammer to it just yet. In some cases, there may be an additional set screw securing the pump to the engine shaft. If so, it will also need to be removed to detach the pump. This is most prominent on 7/8 shaft that originally had a strap-style pump installed. To gain access to the set screw, locate the open access near the shaft of the pump. As you gently and slowly pull the recoil start cable, the shaft inside the access opening will spin, and you will eventually see the set screw moving into view. Using the correct size Allen wrench, remove the set screw. If the set screw falls off into the housing unit when you attempt to pull it out, you'll be able to retrieve it when you pull the pump off. Remove the pump. The bolts and set screw are the only parts holding the pump on. If you find it difficult to slide the pump off, it may be corroded in the shaft allowance. If you still struggle to remove the pump after removing the bolts and possibly set screw, there are some other options. Some pumps have threaded holes on the base of the existing pump that can be used to separate the pump from the shaft. Be careful when torquing down on the bolts so you don't damage the engine housing. If the pump doesn't have threaded holes to utilize, you may need to try to use a pry bar to pull off the pump. It's always best to try and remove the pump by hand instead of using a tool that could damage your pressure washer. Be careful of the shaft as you remove the pump and retrieve the set screw if it happens to fall inside the pump housing. For your vertically mounted pump, use the recoil cable to move the keyway slot to face you. Dry fit your pump without the keyway. Check each leg of the pump. If there's any gap at all between the pump and your engine block, or if there's a metal ring between your engine block and the bolt hole that hits the bottom of the pump's flange, you're going to need spacers. This is important. If you over-tighten your bolts when spacers were needed and not used, the pump, your engine shaft, and pump legs could be damaged or broken. This is not covered under the manufacturer's warranty on the pump and therefore is not returnable. If you suspect that spacers might be needed, use them. Be sure to use the same thickness and quantity of spacers for each bolt tab. Contact our customer support team if you are unsure spacers will be required. If you need a new keyway and your pump didn't come with one, as most of the ROP shop's replacement pumps don't, you can purchase one from our website, theropshop.com, under SKU number 101360. Clean off your old keyway or set your new one in place. Do not install your new pump without a keyway. This will cause the shaft to spin freely or to catch sporadically in the pump allowance. The pump will not function and could become damaged. To prevent future corrosion issues, clean off the shaft with a rag with a cleaning solvent sprayed on it. Do not spray the solvent directly onto the shaft. There's an oil seal that could be damaged by the cleaning chemical. Then apply the anti-seize to the shaft and keyway. This will help to hold the keyway in place. Alternatively, you can put a small dent in one side of your keyway before pushing it onto your engine shaft. This will help the key wedge into place and prevent it from falling out. Do not use any kind of glue or adhesive to hold the keyway in place on the shaft. Apply some of the anti-seize to the non-threaded parts of the bolts you'll use to install the new pump. Line your pump up to the bolt holes. If your pump has 4 bolts, make sure the water inlet and outlet are facing the direction you want them to. Ensure the keyway slot inside the pump is facing you, just like on the shaft. You should be able to spin the pump shaft allowance by hand. However, if you need help to turn the slot, you can do so with a wrench or other tool. Be very careful not to mar the keyway slot. On a horizontally mounted pump, it's easier to set the keyway on the shaft while you're marrying the pump to it. With a vertically mounted pump, you'll have to align the keyway while holding the pump in place as you affix the pump to the shaft. Line up the pump with the shaft and carefully slide the pump on it. It can be tricky to line up the keyway on the pump with the key on the shaft. You may find the key will move if you're not aligned correctly. This might take a few tries. Once the pump is in place, use your fingers to hand tighten the bolts. You can use the original bolts for the installation if they're still in good condition. Again, add spacers if needed to ensure a good fit. Gradually pull the recoil start cable. Do this to determine if there's any binding between the engine and the pump. If there isn't any binding, you can now use your wrench to tighten down the bolts. To ensure the pump is tightened down evenly, follow the same practice you would for a car tire. After tightening one bolt, tighten the bolt on the opposite side of the pump next. You have the option of using a thread locker liquid on the thread of the bolts to help protect the bolts from working themselves loose due to vibration. Using thread locker blue liquid will allow you to remove the bolts again in the future with minimal effort. Be sure to also reinstall the set screw. Reattach the spark plug cable to test the unit. Do not test your power washer pump without water. Doing so can destroy your bearings. The pump is preset from the factory, so you should not need to make any other adjustments. Well, that's it for this installment of Rugged U. Remember, you can always count on the ROP Shop and our helpful customer service staff to be there for you if you need any help. Visit theropshop.com if you need us, and as always, stay rugged.